documenting the front lines of the AI revolution, the AI Rebels podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. As always, I am your co-host, Spencer.
And I'm your other co-host, Jacob, and we're very excited to have Jeff Greenfield on with us today, who has a very unique background. Everything from CEO now of Provalytics to what I saw. Is this right, Jeff, that you were a magician? Is this
Yes.
It's real? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's real.
I wanted to make sure because that is awesome, and I didn't want to be digging into that if that's not true. So magician, chiropractor, is that also true?
That's also true, yep.
My brother's a chiropractor, so
Awesome.
I kind of latched onto that. So very diverse background, and I think we're really excited to see how that has played a role in Provalytics and what you're working on now. So yeah, anyway, thanks for coming on the show. We're excited to have you here.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited to be here. AI is everything these days. You can't kind of turn away from it. So it's making its way into every single sector, every business, and it's moving at light speed at this point, which is awesome.
So true. Yeah, we talk about it on here all the time, how I don't know if there's ever been, everything has been contingent on human minds innovating. And I think AI is the first technology that is self-improving. Like we can now turn AI on itself and say, what can we do? How can we get better? And just use the technology to better itself. It's really amazing and unique and terrifying at the same time.
Better than us all reading self-help books, right?
Yeah. As fun as that is.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now with Provalytics. How have you gotten to this spot in the AI space?
Well, it's kind of wild. You know, I was a marketer after I was a chiropractor. I was a chiropractor for a number of years. I got injured in a car accident, crushed a nerve in my arm, so I couldn't take care of patients anymore. And this is in the early to mid 90s. So I kind of caught the early wave of the internet and ended up on the marketing side of things, buying media for companies, creating other solutions. And one of my clients back in the 2005, 2006 timeframe had this issue where they were buying a lot of digital media and the numbers never added up, meaning, they would have 100 orders in a day. When they add up what their partner said, it would said that they had like 800 or 900 because everybody was taking credit for, and then they were also paying out commissions too. That was the other problem. They were paying out multiple commissions. So we had to create a solution to fix that. So I built out what became C3 Metrics. C3 Metrics was one of the first enterprise multi-touch attribution platforms. And I scaled that company up. And that company was all based on collecting 100% of the available data. So that meant you put a tag on a website like GA4, you collect all the clicks. Any place that ads were running, like on Yahoo or Google or on Facebook, there would be a little tag there so you could collect all of the impression data. And the system worked on the fact that you could collect all this data, line it all up and run machine learning on it. And I scaled that company up and exited there in 2019, about a year before the pandemic, thinking 12 years was enough. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I wasn't going to do measurement because measurement didn't seem initially very sexy to me. Marketing is sexy. You get to come up with big ideas. But the reality is measurement is sexy because you're in the middle of all of these marketing plans. You get to see what some of the biggest marketers in the world are doing, which is pretty damn cool. But during COVID, we saw this like shift happen where the internet shifted to more a privacy-centric world, which meant the data that was used for measurement and also for targeting was now not going to be available anymore. People had to officially opt into things versus companies just collecting all this data. And that created a problem in terms of how you measure, because if you've been used to measuring for 20 years, collecting everything, and now you can only collect 20% of the data, you can't make decisions based upon that. So I saw an opportunity to come back in and be able to provide marketers the same type of output, the same type of insights, if you will, telling them where to spend more and where to spend less, using less data, and then allowing high-level math, statistical modeling, and AI fill in those gaps. And this is all around answering the famous question, which is half the money I spend in marketing is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half. And that's a problem
Right.
that has plagued marketers since the beginning of advertising. And so now it's even more difficult because there's less data available. But the reality is AI helps kind of complete those gaps for us,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
I'm really interested to hear how do you measure the efficacy of AI in filling in those gaps? Is it
Well, in terms
do
of
you measure it
looking
against
at,
historical trends or
yeah, so in terms of looking at the efficacy of it, Spencer, it's really all about looking at how predictable is that model. Because what you're
yeah,
trying to do is that we're not living in a deterministic world because we can't get all that data. In fact, we used to call it deterministic modeling because we had everything. But the reality
right,
is that you can't get inside somebody's head. So nobody really knows what makes people act on something. You can ask someone, how did you hear about us? And they say, oh, I saw an ad on YouTube. But they may have forgotten that they saw 12 TV ads before they saw the ad
Right.
on YouTube type of thing. And so, but what happens is after the model is done and during that process, you go back and you do what's called a validation on it. And what
yeah,
I mean by that is you take typically 12 months worth of data, and we take daily data. It's very granular. And we train the model for a month and we say, essentially, here's how many impressions there were for radio. Here's how many there were for TV. Here's how many there were for
Interesting.
Facebook. So we give it the total impressions at very detail. And it's not just Facebook, it's Facebook, this campaign, this ad set, this creative had this many impressions, this many clicks on this day. We spent this much. So we give it all of that data for every single day. And we tell it, and this is how many orders came in. We'll just use orders as an example.
Mm.
And we do that for a month. Then we run the entire model through from that point forward 5 times. And each time randomly selects days, 20% of the days, where after it's given those detailed impressions, it holds back the orders and says, okay, model, you have to predict what is going to be the order count. So you do it 5 times,
Interesting.
you end up holding back 100% of the data. And now you can look at every single day for a year and you can see how many orders were there actually, how many did the model actually predict. And then from that, you can pull out statistical numbers that are important to folks in this space, mainly what's called an R square, which tells you
yeah,
essentially how well the model predicts, and then a MAPE, which is kind of that error band, if you will. And for us, when we have good data, and when I say good data, because sometimes data comes over and someone says, this is it. And then we find out later on that there was something wrong. Somebody fat fingered something. But when it's good data, the models are typically R squares, a 0.9 or a 0.93, and MAPEs that are in the single digits. And so what does that mean? That means that to a marketer, it says, well, this is something I can trust and maybe I should test it, because most marketers don't have predictive models that they're using. They're just
right,
using this kind of last click, last one in wins type of stuff. So our models are always tested. Every time we get new data, we reevaluate, rerun the entire model because we want to know, is the model holding up? Is it performing as well as it did before? Or is there something odd, strange, essentially, that's going on?
yeah,
So you're building a model for each project, each client. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's the math is essentially the same. That kind of all stays the same. The platform is the same itself, and it's built to create unique models based upon the data that comes in there. So it's essentially agnostic. You could say it's, people say, well, there's a big difference between buying a car and buying eye cream, if you will.
yeah,
People buy a car once every couple of years. People buy eye cream every couple of months. The model doesn't care whether it's cream or auto. It
Yeah.
looks at, because it's built from the perspective of saying, what is it that marketers are buying? Well, this is one of those things, is that marketers invest dollars and most marketers today are confused. They think that you're buying clicks because clicks lead to sales. And the reality is that you're actually buying attention.
Yeah.
And that attention leads to awareness. And when awareness is built up, that then leads to people walking into your store. And that could be clicks or walking into a retail establishment and then making a purchase.
Huh. So I'm curious if you have any successful use cases or stories of clients that have built a model and what kind of results, like the before and after picture, essentially.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing, is that most marketers are very data driven, meaning they follow the numbers, even if the numbers that they're given are wrong. So I can think of one client that when they came to us, they're spending about $10 million a year in marketing. So for a lot of marketers, that's huge. For others, that's relatively small, but 10 million is a large investment. But 80% of it was spent based upon where the numbers were telling them to spend, which was on Google search, which is very down bottom of the funnel, because they were using Google Analytics to tell them what was working and what wasn't working. And they found that Facebook wasn't working that well for them. They had tried it and they weren't spending that much on it. Connected television, their competitors were using. They tried it, but it didn't work for them because it didn't show up. And they had tried other things too, and none of it worked, but paid search worked and they believed in it. So we went in and we looked at not just what they had done recently, but we went back an entire year. And when we went back that entire year, what we found is that connected television actually worked really, really well. But it didn't translate into clicks because there's nothing for you to click on in connected television. Yeah. They were just measuring based upon clicks. Same thing with Facebook, that Facebook was working for them, but they didn't actually see it because what was happening is that someone would be looking through their feed. They would see an ad, like a video. They would scroll past it. And then like a couple of days later, they'd be on Instagram. They'd see the video again. Now they'd watch it. And then they would make a mental note to say, hey, that's pretty cool. I'm going to get that the next time I run out of whatever it is that it was. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, oh my God, yeah, what was that thing called? And they go to Google, they type in the name because they remembered the name. They clicked on the Google ad and then they purchased it. And so,
interesting.
So that's an example where Facebook built the awareness. Instagram is really what closed them, but they navigated to the sale through Google. And in their results in GA4, it showed that Google drove the value. Multiply that a couple thousand times at the end of the month. If you're a smart marketer, you're going to cut your spend on Facebook and you're going to spend more on Google. And that's where we came in. And that's exactly what the situation was. So what we were able to do for them is we were able to show them that they had reached what we call a point of marginal return with Google. It was oversaturated, meaning the problem with Google is you can keep spending and they'll keep cashing those checks. But your cost of acquisition will continue to rise. Your return on ad spend will go down, but Google will still take your money. And what we were able to show them is just by moving a small percentage of that money over, just 10% in the beginning, back to Facebook, they were able to increase their sales by about 20%. And so that gave them enough power to be able to say, well, let's move a little bit more over. And then after a couple of months, they were able to walk into finance and ask for more budget to now go back and do more connected television. And so again, it's all about half the money I'm spending is wasted. I just don't know which half. This really answers that question of which half. And not only that, but then it tells you how to redeploy those dollars so that you can get a bigger bang for your buck.
Wow.
So I'm curious, backtracking slightly. You said that you use AI to fill in some of the missing data, essentially. I'd be curious in hearing a little bit more about that. Is it a case? Are you using generative AI to create data that fits particular profiles, or is it some other method of?
No, great question, Spencer. So what we did is when we built out the methodology in terms of what we use. And what's fascinating is that we're big believers in this idea of kind of back to the future, if you will, because, there's there's a lot of new stuff that's out there, but it seems like the old stuff tends to work best. One of the things, as we talked about before, because of COVID, we lost all of these signals, if you will. We're kind of back to how things were before digital was around, where all you have in order to buy is I can go on Facebook now and I can buy a specific city, maybe even like a zip code or an area like that. I can buy certain demographics, but I can't go to the level of detail that they used to have, like where you used to be able to bid on Ford F-150 leaseholders whose lease was going to expire in 3 months. That kind of stuff is gone. So what we did is that we went back to use techniques that have been around for a while. One, which is very popular, is something called Bayesian. Bayesian is a calculation that's actually been around since the 1700s. And then we use a technique that was actually developed in the early 60s out of the University of Chicago called seemingly unrelated regressions. And that allows us to solve all of these equations at once. Where we actually use AI in the platform is that when we built this out, it was a 4 to 5 part process where data would go in, it would complete the first process, and then it would get evaluated by a human. And then there was a series of things that the human would have to do based upon what they saw. And then they would have to start step 2 and so on and so forth. So we started developing this in 2022. And we really started, and then we built out our own kind of internal AI, you could call it AI, you could call it intelligent automation, if you will, to carry through and do those steps that it used to be a human to do. And what that allows us to do is to speed up the process itself so that there's no human intervention at all. We check the data as it goes in and then it gets spit out at the other end. Nobody touches it. Wow. The next step for us is we take the data, it gets pushed into dashboards, which is what folks in our world like to look at. But what people want, and our customers are marketers, where it's just like any job, things are going great, and then your boss asks for something, and you're like, "Oh my God, I don't even know where to start with that." And so what ends up happening is that they end up reaching out to us, to our team, saying, "Hey, I have a meeting in 35 minutes. Can you guys help me with this? I need like 1 or 2 big insights to talk to my boss about. Oh, this is great. Can you put it on a slide for me?" And I'm like, this is a perfect job for a large language model, a perfect job.
100%.
So we're now in the process of taking some beta data sets from our clients and training it with LLMs, specifically only on their data. And the access that we're going to provide our clients based on the feedback that we've had is via text message. That's what they like. They want to keep it out of Slack because they want it to be an individualized thing. So imagine you have a 24/7 real-time AI analyst who knows your data inside and out, who can make slides for you and give you insights. That's what our customers want. So it seems to be that's a perfect fit for where the large language models are today, if you will.
That's super interesting. Because I've long had this. I'm a web developer by training, and I have a passion for design. Well, let me restate. I don't have a passion for doing design all the time, but I do have a passion for good design. But that aside, from a web development perspective, I've often thought that we're headed to a world where we're going to end up with a lot of generative UI, right? Interfaces that are created on the fly for us. And this is to me, a really interesting realization of it in a rather oblique way. But I've often thought that the first place we would see this happening is for analytics platforms. Platforms with massive arrays of number at their disposal, and then a steep learning curve to marshaling those numbers into something cool. So that's really fascinating, and I'm super interested that they all said, the text messages, how they wanted it delivered. Yeah. So I'm interested, when you deliver those text messages, is it just like a link to the slide that they generate, or what goes on there?
Yeah, that's the plan, is to give them a link where they can go and pick that up. Many times for our clients, the slide is kind of an afterthought. It's really about like, what's a bullet point or two that I can say about the numbers in the last month. Because really it's about, imagine you get in an elevator at work and you're riding up with the CEO
Like, oh
and,
no.
and you're in there for like, maybe if you're in New York City, you may be in there for 8 or 9 minutes and you want to have something important to say and you can text and get an answer really fast. I mean, that's really what this is. And that's the cool thing about having it via text is that no one else has to know about it. It's only
right.
you for that one person. But going back to what you said earlier, Spencer, about kind of the UI, where AI gets really fascinating from a marketing perspective. And this is what makes larger advertisers nervous. So larger advertisers, it's all about, there's a saying I learned many years ago. It's more important to protect the brand than it is to promote the brand because that brand, and I've spent a lot of money creating that brand, making certain that you and I have agreement with that brand. There's an emotional component to that brand.
Yeah.
And so when I advertise, everything has to go through legal. It's got to be approved and everything like that. With what's happening in Facebook, and remember, Facebook and Meta was really designed for 90% of their business are small local advertisers, your local florist, your dentist, stuff like that. All you have to do is type in your name of your company and they will automatically generate ads for you, which is really cool. But the next phase of it is not only will they generate ads, but Spencer, you'll get one ad. Jacob, you'll get completely a different ad because Spencer, you like the color green and Jacob likes the color blue and Facebook knows this.
Crazy.
Or you'll have a different person in the background than Jacob will. And there'll be different messaging based upon where Facebook knows you are in your research journey, if you will. And that's really cool. For local small businesses, that is fantastic. For big brands, that is an absolute nightmare because for a big brand, someone would take a screenshot and say, what is this? It would go up on X and there'd be a firestorm and people would get fired. So, but for small businesses, it's phenomenal. And that's kind of the next wave of this. The problem though, for brands, even small brands, is that, 70% of the effectiveness of all ads is based upon the messaging and the creative and that emotional component of it. And that's having someone else in control of that and individualizing it. You don't get much insight back as a brand and you become very dependent on them. And that's potentially one of the issues there.
Yeah.
So orienting back to Provalytics here directly, I'm really interested. So you mentioned that, and you mentioned this on your website too. I think that we're headed into a world of walled gardens as far as the internet goes, especially with the advent of AI agents proliferating on the open web. So I'm intrigued to hear, are you guys able to say Jake and I are chatting in Discord and Jake is like, yo, have you seen this toothpaste? It's great. I'm like, oh no, I haven't seen this toothpaste. It does look great. And then I go Google the toothpaste. I'm interested to hear, is there anything that you can do to kind of track chains like that? Or is that a case where it's like, you can only cover so much?
It is a case of you can only cover so much. There is that aspect of what you would call word of mouth, if you will. Used to be back in the day before digital, word of mouth was, somebody would tell a friend. If they had a good experience, they'd tell 3 or 4 people. Each of them would tell 3 or 4 people and it would kind of explode like that. And there was that aspect that would be like the organic growth of a brand. You couldn't track it, but it came from positive experiences, if you will. What's cool is that you can kind of see the after effect of that word of mouth online. Because you can look at conversations in Reddit. You can track brands who've had a lot of Discord conversations, Reddit conversations, and you can use things like Google Trends. And you can see over time that the searches and the engagement around that brand goes up. And you can use things like that as kind of like a brand tracker, if you will. And there are companies out there that track brands and what they'll do is every week they'll ask people, have you heard about this brand? What do you feel about this brand? And you can use things like that as almost like a sentiment score, if you will, within the model to see how people feel about it. And the reason you want to do that is because what you don't want to do is overvalue the impact of your advertising. So I'll give you a good example of that. Like, for example, right now, there's a lot of companies out there that are mortgage companies that are advertising to get people to refinance their home and get a mortgage. And then all of a sudden, sometime the next couple of months, rates are going to drop. And then people are going to start going crazy. Mortgage applications are going to go up through the nose. Now, is that the result of advertising? Absolutely not. There's an external event that occurred. Yeah. Now, we can pick that up in our models, but it's also important that models are not mind readers. So the more data we can give the model, the better. The problem is that it's a catch-22 because information like interest rates and these numbers tend to come from, the federal government and other sources, different universities. And so, the data from last month may not be available for another 2 months.
Yeah.
So as a marketer, you have to say to yourself, do I want to wait 3 months to get an answer about what happened 3 months ago to help me make my decision this month? Or would I rather have something that is directionally correct faster? And our philosophy is, let's be less wrong than we were last month. And one thing we can do about being less wrong is getting answers as quickly as possible. Because otherwise, we're just going to go with our gut and go with the GA4 data, which we know is, at least we know Provalytics is less wrong than GA4, definitely.
Yeah, right. It's better. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing. I mean, this is a common problem we're seeing is this idea of how do you have live data? How can we integrate that into our models, our platforms? And it is a very tricky, I mean, it was not that long ago that there was a cutoff at, what was the year? What year did they cut it off with data? I can't remember.
Oh, you were 21 with the LLMs?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like
2024, 2023, something like that.
Yeah. And now it's going off and searching the web. But here's what's interesting, what we find with our data. With our data, and this is kind of, and maybe it's because of my age and stuff like that, but there's an addiction with real time, especially in marketing. We've gotten marketers used to the idea that I'm advertising and I should be checking this data every hour. And if things aren't going in the right direction, I need to go in and change something. And
that trader mentality.
Yeah, that's actually a great analogy. And marketing is not day trading. It's definitely not. It's more the Berkshire Hathaway method. Back in the days of Mad Men, they would plan out a campaign and they would launch it, and then they would sit back and wait 3 to 6 months to see what would happen. And I'm not suggesting that, because with the tool sets we have today, we can actually measure how long it takes for things to actually have an impact. Yeah. We can measure it. So we can see that, for a particular client, their paid social is taking, let's say, 18 days on average to convert. So what that means is that we should probably wait 20 to 25 days to let everybody kind of go through a full cycle before we make a decision to cut a campaign or to double down on it, type of thing. So we have kind of these guardrails that let us know how often we should do things. And even though we could update our models daily for clients, we don't, because we don't want to encourage bad behavior. We kind of encourage our folks to kind of sit on their hands. I think there is a tendency for folks, at least in my agents, in my world, to want to keep themselves continuously occupied with the most updated bit of data, because, it seems like they're more up to date than anyone else. And the reality is that, hey, being a couple days behind isn't that bad. Sometimes it's better to pan the camera back. You get a broader perspective on what's actually going on. When you're in the details of that minute to minute, you can't spot trends. You can't get the insights you need, because you really need to, in order to steer the ship, you need that broader perspective.
Got it. So when you're importing, let's say you're building a model for a company, are you connecting to their live data for that? Or is it some sort of an export? How does that process look as far as?
That's a great question. So we have the capability to go, let's say, most people are advertising on Google and most are advertising on Meta and other places. And there's these public APIs that are available, and they could click a button, give us access, and we could
Right.
automatically suck all this data down. But, and there's a big but, most of the clients that we work with, they have multiple partners or agencies that are doing their buying for them. And so in order for our stuff to work, there's like a couple of phases to it, which is we provide insights, but in order to find that missing half, we can find it for them. But in order for them to actually redeploy it and spend smarter and better, they actually have to act on it. And the people that are acting on it, in many cases, are vendors that are working on their behalf, advertising agencies.
Yeah.
And so imagine this situation. Imagine you guys have your own ad agency. You don't know about us. The client hires us unbeknownst to you. We get access. We go in and you guys are buying, let's say, Facebook, Meta, and stuff like that. So we go in there and we get all the data. And then all of a sudden, one day, you're introduced to us and you're being told by us, here's how you have to do things from now on. You're going to be like, who are these people? What is going on here? I thought
right.
were going great, right?
Yeah.
So in order for the client to have the big win, we need to get everybody, we need to build consensus with everyone across the board. So what we found, after 20 years or so almost of doing this is that being introduced in the beginning of when working with a client, with their agency, and becoming a partner with them and having them send us the data instead of us going in and grabbing it, although it would be more convenient for them, but sending us that data immediately puts us in communication. And that's kind of that first stage, because what's going to happen is that they have a team of experts, and you guys have a team of experts at your new ad agency that know Meta inside and out. You guys understand the signals. You guys know how to buy it. And all of a sudden, about a month or so from now, we're going to come with new walk-in papers that say, hey, ignore what Facebook is telling you and follow this. And you're going to be like, I'm an expert. Why would I do that? And it's like, well, because Meta doesn't know about the connected television. Meta doesn't know about all the billboards. Meta doesn't know about the direct mail. Meta doesn't know about the in-store promotion at several thousand targets around the US. Meta doesn't know about anything like that. But Provalytics does. And so, but we have to be in communication in order for us to build up some trust where you're willing to even test it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, we're kind of old school, that manual process, plus the larger the client, the more money they're spending. We have some that are spending, $300 to $500 million a year. Most of the data that they have is not available to click through an API. Some of their marketing data is, but it's hidden behind firewalls. We have to go through security checks and all that stuff. And a lot of the TV data that they're buying isn't available. Sometimes there's like a 2 or 3 week delay in terms of getting the data back that we need for the models.
Got it.
So slight tangent to that question. It's very popular for people to say, the numbers don't lie, but the reality is that we're very good at lying to ourselves using numbers. And I'm curious to hear, does Provalytics, do you wrap your numbers in a more opinionated frame, so to speak, of trying to, point customers like, hey, interpret the numbers this way? Or do you just promise customers, we will give you, better, more interesting raw numbers than Meta Analytics or Google Analytics?
Well, what we promise them is, and you heard me say this before, Spencer, it'll be less wrong than what they're used to looking at. But I think you hit on something incredibly important, which is that you can take the same set of numbers and one person can look at it one way and the other person can look at it from another way. I always talk about the car accident, and there's people on each corner, and the cop asks one person, what did they see? And then they go across the street and they hear something completely different. And they have to interview everyone and kind of put together that complete picture. And the reality is, for our customers, when they come to us, they're usually seeking answers to specific questions. That's usually what starts their search. Like, why is it we can't get CTV to work? And how do I get finance to give us more money to pay for something that I can't prove is actually working? And so we start off with the numbers to answer the questions that they need to have answered. That's where it starts at. And then from there, then we're able to kind of, the numbers are the numbers, but the insights that you pull from those numbers are really what matters to people. Because raw data is just, it's like people just like, because it's very easy. I've seen reports from agencies before where it's an email with 35 bullet points of stuff. And it's just like, what am I supposed to do with this? Can you give me one sentence that tells me the most important thing? Because I always tell the story that you may be putting together a presentation as an agency for your client. And let's say it's 15 pages. Okay. And it provides all the insights of everything that happens. Well, now they have to present their numbers to the chief marketing officer. And that chief marketing officer only wants it on one slide. So now the CMO has one slide and the CMO has to give it to the CEO for a board presentation. And so your 15-page deck goes down to one slide, which then becomes a single bullet point for the board. And so you always have to think in terms of what is the most important thing that people need to know from this most recent look at the data? What's going to change things the most for people? And what is the perspective that they're looking at right now?
Yeah, I used to coach competitive debate. And there were a couple cases where there was a statistic that I told my students to use on both sides of the case that they wrote, because, it just matters how you spin it. And then similarly to your point about all of those bullet points being, condensed down to a single bullet point. Sorry, this is tangential, but it was leading somewhere that I forgot. Now it's just tangential. But anyways, I like to call that like the outcomes versus the impact, because a lot of people conflate the two and they think that, outcome and impact is the same thing. And it's not entirely true. There's a lot of outcomes that are non-impact. So it's interesting to hear about like the focus on answering specific questions. I think that's really powerful and interesting approach.
And LLMs are perfect for that.
Exactly.
Even if you're not sure which one to pull from, you can have a conversation with one of those that are out there, like a ChatGPT or others, and it'll give you kind of like that distilled bullet point that the CMO would give to the CEO. And then you can look at it and say, yeah, that's not going to help my client. Or no, that's exactly what they're looking for. Right. What I find where LLMs, at least for me in my day-to-day life, are useful is awesome writing partner, awesome editor in terms of that. And I encourage and I train my team how to use them on a regular basis because it's a tool, just like anything else. And it's silly not to utilize it. But, really, really good for summarization and pulling out those points. And I think as well for people that are very junior in any industry, finding those insights are very, very difficult. And just having a conversation with an LLM can help you gain and train yourself on how you would do it on your own as well, too. Because I don't think we want to rely upon these always to pull those things out.
Right.
No, definitely not. And plus, learning to do it on your own as well, unlocks a higher level of LLM usage, because then if you know what a good answer looks like and you know your field well enough, you can start pushing the LLM to give you better answers.
That's 1,000%. Yeah, without a doubt. I've used the LLMs to do some coding in languages that I don't know anything about, but I do know enough about coding and development to know what's capable, what can be done. And I also knew what I wanted at the end for it to do. So the more you know on your own, the more you can extract from these awesome tools.
Yeah, totally agree. I feel like I say this all the time, but people think AI is this magic box and you just have to write a sentence. You can say whatever you want to say and it'll give you this perfect answer. And it's not like that at all. There's a lot of skill involved. That's why people, maybe it's starting to go away now because models are getting better, but like prompt writing was this whole people were hiring expert prompt writers for a while because it really is. There's a lot of best practices. There's a lot of application of honestly managerial principles that we've tried to apply for a long time that you have to use with AI, especially when you get into the world of agents. And I wish I could just help people see that though the technology is novel, the best practices and how to use it is not. Anyone can use it. Just use it in the way you would use other tools. There's nothing complicated, nothing crazy about it. It just can unlock so much more capacity.
The way I like to put it is AI is like your coworker Kyle. He's very good at his job, but he's also really into energy healing. So you better double check everything he says.
I will tell you guys one thing. I sat in on a call about a month and a half ago with, there was probably about 20 of us, and there were, I think, 6 or 7 teenagers from 14 to 16 from all over the world. And the purpose of the call was for us to ask questions about their AI usage and their usage of ChatGPT.
Interesting.
And these different engines. And the things that I was fascinated by, because we started this conversation talking about how fast things are moving and how fast things are changing. But to a 14-year-old, things aren't moving that fast. It's just the technology. Yeah. So it's interesting that when I go back and I remember AltaVista, AV.com was the top search engine, and then Google came out, and I could see how to someone who was like 20 years older, my God, what is happening here? So to them, it's just technology. It's not moving that quickly.
Right.
None of them said it feels like it's moving fast at all. So it's just to us because it feels like our foundation is it's cracking or it's broken or it's moving or expanding. But the reality is that even though it feels like things are accelerating at a faster rate, they're not to the younger people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate to tell you both that you're old, but you are older.
I know.
Dang it. Well, I got to find a new gig then. Podcasting is a young man's game.
All right, Jeff, I have a question that I have just been so curious what you would answer to. And it's not, it could be related to Provalytics and everything, but it's going back to your magician days. And I'm curious what lessons you learned as a magician that you now use both in AI and the business world.
Well, the biggest lesson is that humans think in a linear fashion. So when we think to solve problems and I want to go from A to D, we go A, B, C. Magicians know this and we're able to exploit it because we know that even though you may say, I'm not going to go A, B, C, D, you're going to do that. You just can't stop yourself. It's the way the human mind works. And so that's a huge lesson, both from a development standpoint of view and a technology standpoint of view, is that things don't have to move in a linear fashion. It definitely feels like all of us right now that it's not moving in a linear fashion.
Right.
That kind of acceleration aspect of things. But from magic, and the way I always viewed magic is that for most people who were viewing magic and were entertained, they saw magic as a way to kind of think outside the box, as a way you could say is like a stress reduction because it takes you to a different place. It expands your way of thinking. And, for some people, it gives them the belief that maybe there is still real magic in the world. But more than anything else is that it puts you in a different place and kind of reduces your stress.
Yeah.
When I was a chiropractor, my job was to reduce stress on somebody's nervous system. And now in the field that I'm in now, in this world of marketing measurement, where AI is a tool that we use, really what we're doing is we're solving the biggest pain point that marketers have, the biggest pain point that organizations have, which is trying to get the numbers to line up because they don't. So you could say that I've been in the stress reduction business my whole life. That's
you're an expert.
The lesson that I kind of pull all the way through everything is that, stress is not good. for any of us. So anything we can do to make our lives a little better and a little less stressful is a good thing.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. One more slight technical question: has it become more difficult to put these models together since the advent of LLMs, or was the phase change really the privacy changes that happened just immediately post-COVID?
From our aspect, it was the privacy changes, because essentially there was kind of an understanding as part of the internet ecosystem, the advertising ecosystem, that all this stuff is free. It's paid for by advertising, and in return, we get all this data, and then we can use that to hyper target. We can use that to measure. And then everything changed literally over the course of a year or two. And then on top of that, most people used to spend most of their time in the digital world on what we would call the open web. You would go from website to website to website. Now these websites essentially are, as we talked earlier, these walled gardens, their own ecosystems. And it's still just a website, but there's a wall up that says, hey, you can't get any of this data. It doesn't leave here. So let me give you an example. If you're a large CPG brand selling detergent, let's say, you can go to Amazon and you can say, I've got a list of my customers. I want to target my customers on Amazon. And they say, okay, come here, hook up, and we'll do a data clean room. You're going to pass us your data. It'll be anonymized, and we'll find your customers on Amazon, and you can buy Amazon ads to target them. Great. Oh, wow, this is working great. We saw a lift in sales. I'd like to take that same list now and go over to Walmart with it. And they're like, oh, no. So now I have to go to Walmart and do the same thing with Walmart. But Walmart data is not going to talk to Amazon data, which is not going to talk to Disney data. So it's almost like Amazon and Walmart have their own internet. It's their own universe, which is great for them, bad for the advertiser. That's the problem.
I was going to ask. Yeah. So there's this, feels like there's this balance that has to happen between rent-seeking behavior and advertising, right? I've never personally been bothered by advertising that much because I just kind of, I just ignore it. I usually have to. I'm very good at ignoring ads. Anyways, but it's interesting to see there's been kind of a backlash against advertising as a funding model, but in reality, I don't know how you have the open web without it. There's a OpenAI member of OpenAI who is popular on Twitter, Rune, and he posted the other day something about, along these similar lines, and it got me thinking hard about, where do LLM providers go? And I feel like inevitably there's going to be ads injected, and I'd be interested to hear both of your perspectives on that prospect. Because on one hand, I don't like the idea of it because I like, the idea of my chat remaining pure and unsullied by ads. But on the other, I sort of get there's a necessity of funding here. And you think back to public commons in the past that were commercialized, right? Newspapers, etc. They were already ads. And that's how they got their funding. Anyways, long way of saying I'd be interested to hear both of your perspectives on, the prospect of ads intruding into something and the impact of, walled gardens versus open spaces governed by, fueled by ads.
I was going to say, off of a point you actually said earlier on, Jeff, where you mentioned, and Spencer, you mentioned too, this idea of generative UI and then Meta building ads and unique ads based on the individual. And honestly, it makes it kind of scary when I start thinking about the way an LLM could advertise, because if we're not careful, it could very quickly turn into, it's just blending the advertisement into its answers to you.
Yeah.
And it becomes you're not aware, like a newspaper, right? It's the classifieds. You go to that page, you're seeing ads, they're ads. But it becomes this very fine line to walk where who's going to be checking the ads that ChatGPT is giving me if it's not even, there's no delineation. It's just its answer. And I base my decision on that. It can get scary.
It's very similar to Google.
Yeah.
Google started with 2 ads on the right-hand side, and then they put one up top. And now, depending upon the search, it can be the entire first page, if you will. So
Yeah.
contextual advertising has been part of the growth of the digital advertising ecosystem. But going back, Spencer, to what you were asking about in terms of, is advertising going to be here? We don't have to go back that far. We just go back to streaming.
Yeah.
Anytime you have something, a product where your cost to deliver that product increases exponentially as more people utilize it, you need to have a monetization platform behind it that's based upon usage. And subscriptions didn't do it. The streaming companies, you can't do that. You can't do a free model. You have to have some sort of subscription.
Right.
Subscriptions, they were still losing money, but advertising works because the more people that watch, the more minutes are available. So streaming up until 5 years ago was the most expensive undertaking for companies. They were spending billions, hundreds of millions of dollars to buy content. And there was a war to buy just about everything. If you had a series that had run once before, someone was going to buy it because they needed to fill their catalogs up. But now we've found something even more expensive to run, these large language models. And so the only thing that will pay for it is advertising. And if you go back over 10 years worth of investor quarterly calls with Netflix and Reed Hastings, they talked about how there will never be advertising on Netflix. And now there's advertising, and it's growing, and it's doing really well for them. And that kind of opened the door for all streaming to be able to do the same thing. We've already seen in some of the earlier code that there's integrations for it. We have also seen, taking this contextual aspect to another level, a lot of people are utilizing. And I think what they're doing is they're seeing, what are people using this for? One of the things that they're seeing people are using this for is, what's the best air filter for me in my situation? And it goes and searches the web and finds the best ones and tells the person, this is why this is the best one for you. Would you like to buy it? Click here. And they won't even go to Shopify. There's going to be a complete integration in there, which is going to upend other business models on the web and stuff like that, which to us is going to feel like things are moving very quickly. But to today's 11 or 12-year-old, it's just going to be business as usual for them. But that's going to be the way they're monetized. The way they're going to monetize is have a direct link to commerce, which makes it very powerful, which makes it almost, when you think about Amazon has advertising and commerce all built in. So it's kind of its own complete engine when you start to think about it. Google has advertising, but there's no commerce. You have to click to go someplace else. Facebook has started integrating through Instagram. It'll bring up a picture of it. TikTok has the TikTok shops, which are directly integrated. ChatGPT is going to go direct as well too, but it'll be part of that same window that'll be there. So that'll give them that same end-to-end that Amazon has, which makes it incredibly, incredibly powerful. But from a consumer standpoint of view, fewer clicks makes my job easier. I trust this model. It hasn't pointed me in the wrong direction yet. So I trust its recommendation. So, and in return, ChatGPT or whichever model it is gets a commission as like an affiliate.
Yeah, right.
And probably also from that click, if you will, also gets paid for that click too. So double dipping just the same way that Amazon does. So more power to them. I think that's the direction that things are going. But that's the only way that they will ever pay for all the power requirements and the chip requirements for this.
You're right that it scales. That's one of the few revenue streams that can scale with usage.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately because my knee-jerk reaction is disgust. I don't like the idea, right? But then I think about it more and I'm like, well, my revealed preference kind of says differently. It's not like ads on every other website have driven me away from the internet.
Yeah, right.
I spend too much time there, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so it's an interesting tension to me between stated and revealed preferences, and I wondered how that's going to go when it. And I wonder too which company is going to be first to do it. Is it going to be Google? They already have some advertising engine. Is it going to be Meta? I wouldn't be surprised. Zuck loves to monetize.
They'll get so much hate, and then everyone will do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be fascinating. Wow.
Yeah. It's gonna be very interesting. Like you said, moving fast for us, not for everybody, but for us, moving fast.
That's right. That's right. And also remember, it's not always the first company that wins.
Right. Yeah.
If you go back in the history of Microsoft was very slow to the internet. They sat back and they waited. They jumped into this one a lot earlier, but it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to see a lot of kind of late bloomers that are going to come on board. And then also, the real question is that these initial entries here, the Perplexity and the open AIs, they may power other companies that kind of layer on top of it. So you could look at something like an open AI is to be like an AWS, if you will, for AI models.
Yeah,
that'll be interesting.
It's going to be interesting to see where the business models come out 5 years from now, because it's definitely going to change.
Yeah, it will. Well, Jeff, this has been an excellent conversation.
Really fascinating.
Yeah, very fast. It's just a totally different little niche little view on this whole AI revolution that's happening. We haven't had
this perspective yet. It's been really good. Yeah.
Jeff, if people want to follow you, well, actually, first, we always like to ask at the end for a quick piece of advice for followers who may not be technical, who are scared, who are not super well-versed in AI. What advice would you give them to stay, even though it's moving fast for many, to stay current, to figure it out?
I would say, this is kind of what I've used for myself, not just with AI, but with digital and the internet. Things have always been moving, always been changing. You need to, dedicate time each week to challenging yourself to learn new things.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
That's really the key, and don't feel like you're behind, because you're always going to be behind. There's always going to be people that are out there right now that are innovating, that are thinking ahead, that are coming up with the latest and the greatest. So you're not going to be them necessarily. Maybe you will be. But the most important thing is to, give yourself an hour or two each week. Maybe it's the weekends.
Yeah.
Where you say, hey, I'm going to figure out how to use these agents that OpenAI has, because I read something about it. And just play around with it. And it doesn't mean that you're going to start using it, but at least you become familiar with it.
Yeah.
Something you at least have a conversation about. So every week I try to teach myself something different. Because any advice I give right now, if this airs a week and a half from now, it's going to be outdated at that point. But the main thing is what will never be outdated is to challenge yourself and always look for new stuff.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
My pleasure.
If people want to follow you, follow everything you're working on, what are the best channels, best platforms for that?
Our best platform would probably be LinkedIn.
Okay.
Find me on LinkedIn. If they want to learn more about Provalytics, you can go to provalytics.com, or you can go to Get Prova, which is GETPROVA.com. Prova means proof in Italian. So get proof.
Cool.
That's what it's all about.
Love it.
Love that. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jeff. We'll definitely stay in contact. We're excited to see where you go in the coming months.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.